The first light touches Three-Eye Atlas as it glides toward the inner sun, and the sky holds its breath with it. The distant object moves like a pale ember drifting through an ocean of gold, and every telescope follows its slow brightening with quiet anticipation. Astronomers expect a familiar glow, a gentle rise, a simple curve drawn by nature's calm hand. Yet something in the light feels uncertain, like a whisper bending away from its meaning. The reflections slip out of rhythm, forming small fractures that shimmer along its surface like cracks in a forgotten mirror. These subtle breaks seem to shift with each rotation, as though the object listens to an unseen force hidden behind the sunlight. A faint tremor grows along the brightness, and the curve drifts into shapes no model can cradle, and yet the change feels strangely deliberate. Observers lean closer, sensing a tension rising beneath the numbers like soft footsteps approaching through dust. The air inside each control room turns still, while screens glow with uncertain light, and charts form slow, gentle waves that refuse to settle. The object glimmers with a warmth that feels almost aware, as though something deep within it stirs awake under the growing heat of the sun. With every passing hour, the brightness slips further from prediction, pulling the minds of its watchers toward questions they are not ready to speak. And in that quiet shift, the mystery begins to bloom, carrying the first hint of a journey that will challenge everything they believe. A thin hush settles over the night as the first pulse rises from the distant object, and the darkness seems to lean closer as though listening with careful breath. The signal is faint at first, a soft flicker threading through the quiet static of a lonely sky, and it trembles like a heartbeat buried beneath a mountain of drifting stars. In one observatory, a tired technician watches the line dip and lift in a rhythm, too gentle to alarm yet too clean to ignore, and he marks it as noise while the night presses cold fingers against the windows. The world feels slow around him, while the signal repeats with measured calm, forming a delicate pattern that seems to glide through the instruments with eerie confidence. The pulse fades, then returns slightly stronger, as though the object tests the silence around it, searching for a mind willing to hear its quiet voice. Hours later, a second observatory half a world away receives the same rhythmic glow, and a young astronomer pauses in confusion as the numbers settle into perfect symmetry across her screen. The pattern rises in soft waves, each crest shaped with a precision the cosmos rarely offers uninvited, and a shiver runs through her as she realizes coincidence is slipping out of reach. She calls her colleagues, speaking with a voice barely above a whisper, while the pulse continues its steady climb, weaving itself into the night with a confidence that feels strangely alive. The two observatories compare their readings, and every curve aligns as though drawn by an unseen hand shaping the same moment across oceans and continents. No natural object gives off pulses with such measured grace, and the realization begins to settle like slow falling ash inside each quiet control room. The technicians adjust their instruments, searching for flaws or drifting calibrations, but the pulse grows sharper with each correction, as if reacting to their attention. A gentle unease spreads among them, a soft tightening in the chest that comes when the familiar world leans slightly out of place and reveals a darker undercurrent beneath its surface. They watch the signal expand, forming a repeating arc of luminous breath, and the cadence settles into a rhythm too deliberate to dismiss and too calm to declare a threat. Outside the observatories, the night remains quiet, heavy, and still, while the stars shine with ancient indifference, yet the pulse feels new, like a secret rising from a hidden chamber deep beneath the cosmic floor. Another observatory joins the analysis, and the pattern becomes undeniable, its timing exact, its strength unwavering, its voice almost patient, as though it has waited a long time to be found. Across the global network, whispers begin to move from screen to screen, carrying the soft tension of minds, unsure if they are witnessing discovery or wandering into an unseen threshold. The watchers lean into the glow of their monitors, feeling the signal tremble against their senses like a distant footstep echoing down a cavern lit by a single fading lamp. The pulse grows steadier, slipping into the same interval again and again until its rhythm feels almost like breath, and the watchers sense a quiet presence hidden within the curve. They begin to record every shift, every small dip of brightness, every gentle rise that follows, and their notes soon form a chain of soft revelations, hinting at purpose within the trembling light. Data models attempt to mimic the pattern, but each simulation drifts apart, collapsing under the weight of an order too subtle and too refined for randomness to cradle. The astronomers speak less now, letting the silence of their rooms hold the moment, while the pulse continues to bloom like a slow, unfolding flower touched by some distant, unseen wind. A deep awareness spreads across those who watch, as though the object is no longer simply reflecting sunlight, but offering a deliberate echo cut from the quiet fabric of space. The pulse shifts once more, forming a new crest, and the change feels like a gentle knock at a locked door, and the watchers feel their thoughts tremble with soft uncertainty. They begin to ask themselves if they are listening to a natural tremor carved by chance, or the early signature of something that thinks, moves, or waits beyond the edges of their understanding. The signal moves again, then settles with the calm of a mind taking its first deliberate breath, and the observers hold still, as though any sudden movement might disturb the fragile moment blooming in front of them. A question rises inside, each of them quiet but heavy, pressing gently against the fragile boundary between knowledge and wonder, and they feel the weight of possibility hanging in the air. What if the pulse is not noise at all, but the first sign of something trying to speak? The first thermal image arrives in a quiet shimmer of red and gold, and the room softens as scientists lean closer to the strange warmth rising from the drifting object. The infrared map glows with soft flickers, forming shapes that dance across the surface like embers waking beneath a thin crust of ice, and something in the pattern feels impossibly alive. The temperatures shift with gentle precision, rising in smooth intervals, then falling with calm intention, as though the object breathes through a hidden rhythm untouched by randomness. A researcher adjusts his scope, expecting noise or instrument drift, but each correction sharpens the same quiet pulse of heat, sliding across the frozen layers like a whispered signal of purpose. Natural bodies do not warm and cool in such steady waves, because the cosmos is wild and its cold objects obey only chaos. Yet this pattern flows like a slow heartbeat, guided by unseen order. The observers gather around the display, drawn to the glow that pulses across the surface like light drifting through a sleeping lantern, and the night around them feels heavier as the mystery deepens. One analyst traces the curve with her finger, noticing how every peak carries the same height, and every valley returns to the same soft stillness, as though the object follows a schedule written somewhere in its inner bones. She whispers that it looks like regulation, a word that sits uneasily in the air, pressing against the fragile wall between scientific caution and the quiet fear of meaning. The heat drifts along the surface in a pattern too elegant for geological chance, forming a slow spiral that suggests movement deep within, and the watchers feel a cold shiver bloom under their skin. Another model tries to simulate the behavior, but each attempt collapses into noise, because randomness cannot hold such graceful timing, and no algorithm of natural ice can breathe with such quiet order. The object shines faintly in infrared, each glowing contour shaped by a force that seems to think about where warmth should flow, and the scientists feel a soft tremble of awe threading through their doubt. Conversations drift into whispers, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the delicate warmth, weaving across the screen like a hidden hand, adjusting its inner temperature with gentle intent. They watch the next cycle unfold, and it repeats with tender symmetry, rising at the exact moment the previous one fell, holding the room in a quiet spell that neither coincidence nor luck can explain. A young astronomer speaks softly, saying the heat feels like a sleeping creature stretching beneath layers of frost, and though she smiles at her own imagination, her voice trembles with subtle unease. The watchers compare data from different nights, and each map carries the same calm structure, forming a chain of thermal breaths that drift into one another like waves guided by the moon. No comet behaves this way. No shard of ice maintains intervals with such serene consistency, and the truth settles slowly inside their minds, like dust falling in a deserted corridor. The heat pattern tightens, forming a narrow band that travels along the object's spine in a steady crawl, and the watchers feel a rising tension, as though witnessing something private and unfinished. A senior scientist studies the map with a quiet frown, sensing the shape of intention forming inside the glow, and he wonders if the object is preparing for something hidden beneath its fractured shell. The warmth gathers in controlled bursts, each one sliding gently into place like pieces of an unseen mechanism, aligning with patient clarity, and the air in the room grows still as breath. They check for solar influence, but the cycle persists even in shadow, as though the heat is born from within, rising through pathways shaped with silent purpose and quiet precision. Another team joins the analysis, and their screens show the same long waves of warmth, drifting in serene arcs that feel more like thought than chance, and the collective silence deepens around them. The object seems to be choosing where to warm, choosing where to cool, choosing how each interval should rise and fall like a living map drawn by an unseen pulse of reason. The researchers exchange uneasy glances, sensing a boundary shifting beneath their understanding, as if they stand on the threshold of a truth waiting to unfold from within the quiet glow. A theory begins to whisper through their minds, fragile yet persistent, saying that the heat might be part of a system, a method of balance or preservation or awakening hidden inside the frozen body. They see the next pulse rise, then drop in perfect symmetry, and the room holds its breath as the realization settles that the heat is not an accident and the pattern is not a mistake. Something inside the object is adjusting itself, shaping its temperature, with tender control and moving toward a purpose the watchers can feel but cannot yet name. The question grows slowly, and the quiet tension of their thoughts pressing gently against the dark, like a soft knock on a distant door. What exactly is being controlled? The last pulse fades like a breath drawn too slowly, and the screens dim into a thin, uneasy quiet that settles across every observatory touched by the mystery of the drifting object. The rhythm that once rose with gentle confidence now collapses into stillness, leaving the scientists suspended in a silence deeper than the void that carries the object through space. Hard ultraviolet bands fall flat across the spectrum, a clean, empty stretch, as though something inside the object has closed its eyes and turned inward into a secret place no instrument can reach. The watchers stare at the blank lines, sensing the shape of absence like a shadow lying across the room, and the air feels strangely heavy, as if dust itself is listening for what comes next. One technician suggests a failure, a simple exhaustion of energy, but his voice wavers because the silence feels too intentional, too poised to belong to decay. A researcher angles her chair forward, studying the stillness with furrowed thought, noticing that the empty band is smooth, without static or drift, holding a purity that feels deliberate in its restraint. Natural systems rarely fall quiet like this, because chaos always leaves scars of noise, yet the object rests in a silence, polished like glass, and the room around her shivers with unspoken wonder. The team gathers their data, comparing the last pulse to the moment it ended, noticing that the rhythm did not fade gradually, but cut sharply, as though a switch had been thrown deep inside the object's frozen heart. That sudden drop carries intention, a decision made beneath layers of ice and dust, and the watchers feel a quiet tension coil through them, like a thread pulled tight by invisible hands. Another scientist leans back, breathing slowly, tasting the soft, metallic chill of uncertainty, as he wonders if the object is conserving something, saving its warmth for a moment that has not yet arrived. The silence stretches onward, settling into the ultraviolet bands, like snow falling on an untouched field, and the watchers feel the moment deepen into something fragile and haunting. They whisper theories about cooling systems or dormant cycles or hidden mechanisms winding down, yet each explanation feels thin against the quiet weight, pressing through the senses with unnatural calm. Static fails to appear in the readings, forming a void too perfect for accident, because real machines and real bodies shed noise like breath, but this silence carries a stillness shaped by choice. A young analyst watches the flatline so closely her eyes ache, and she senses the object not as a failing body, but as a mind retreating behind a door to gather itself before speaking again. Her thought unsettles her, yet she cannot escape the feeling that the silence is not absence, but preparation, a slow turning inward towards something waiting to unfold. The scientists continue to adjust their instruments, scanning for stray photons and tiny fluctuations, but nothing stirs, and each empty sweep draws them deeper into the soft hollow between pulses. One senior astronomer steps away from the screens, pacing in slow circles, as though moving might coax the cosmos to breathe again, and he wonders if the object is holding its pulse like a withheld confession. He feels the silence settle on his shoulders with the weight of a memory not yet formed, and he senses that the absence itself is a message carved into the darkness with quiet precision. The room grows colder, as if the temperature responds to their rising unease, and every mind present drifts toward the same unspoken fear that the object has entered a phase beyond their prediction. The silence continues to spread through the ultraviolet range, like ink dissolving into water, forming a smooth, untouched field of emptiness that feels more like waiting than ending. The watchers begin to sense time slowing around them, stretching thin like quiet dawn, light slipping across an empty landscape, and they feel as though the object watches them from behind its unseen veil. They ask themselves if silence signals death or transformation, because nature rarely offers binary answers, and the universe moves through states of becoming with slow, deliberate breath. The object holds its quiet pose, refusing to reveal its next intention, and the scientists hover between awe and dread, sensing the boundary where knowledge dissolves into possibility. A technician leans forward, whispering that the calm feels alive like the moment before a tide turns or a long-buried mechanism stirs, and every heart in the room tightens with the same fragile intuition. The silence deepens into a presence, a weight, a shape carved from stillness itself, and the watchers realize that something is shifting beneath the quiet skin of the object, preparing for a change that none of them can predict. They sense the tension building behind the stillness, like a rising breath held too long, and they wait in the dim glow of their monitors for the next sound, the next pulse, the next sign that the object has awakened again. The silence feels endless, yet every moment carries the soft, charged hum of expectation, as though the cosmos is holding its breath with them, listening for a whisper rising from a distant frozen core. Is this the sound of something ending, or the quiet before something new begins? As 3i Atlas drifts into the inner zodiacal dust, the sunlight thickens around it like molten gold, and the object glides through the glowing haze with a quiet poise that feels strangely deliberate. The dust swirls around its frozen edges, forming soft, luminous halos that cling to its surface like drifting memories caught in slow motion, and every telescope holds its gaze fixed upon the moment of closest approach. The watchers anticipate gentle brightening, the simple flare any icy body should offer when touched by the sun, yet the air in each control room feels heavy with a tension that rises like a soft tide beneath the quiet screens. Then, without warning, a burst erupts from the sunward side, a violent bloom of radiant force that blossoms into space like a silent explosion carved from pure light. The flare stretches outward in a wave that glitters like shattered glass, and for a heartbeat the object disappears behind the rising veil of brightness, leaving only a trembling outline in the spectral haze. Scientists gasp softly, leaning closer as the light curves spike upward in a sudden, jagged climb, shaped with the sharp grace of something pushed beyond natural behavior. But before fear can settle, the spike collapses, flattening into a calm, unnatural plateau, as though the object has swallowed the burst, folding it into itself, instead of breaking beneath the sun's fierce heat. The light steadies with eerie composure, holding a smooth line that defies every model, expecting the chaotic scatter of vaporizing ice, and the watchers feel cold, surprise, slide gently through their thoughts. A technician whispers that the flare should have torn the surface apart, scattering fragments through the dust, but the sensors show no plume of debris, no drifting cloud of particles, only a quiet, shimmering stillness wrapped around the object. Another analyst sees the flattened curve and feels a soft tremor in her chest because the shape resembles absorption, a controlled intake of solar force, rather than a natural reaction carved by heat and collision. The team rechecks their readings, scanning for errors or sensor drift, yet the data holds steady with a clarity that leaves no room for doubt, and the calm plateau glows across their screens like a quiet confession. Outside the observatories, the sunlight continues its ancient fall through space, touching the object with unfiltered strength, yet the body refuses to behave like dust or ice or stone. Instead, it seems to drink the fire with slow, measured purpose. A senior scientist studies the moment frame by frame, noticing how the flare wraps around the object, then folds inward, as though drawn through channels hidden beneath the surface, and the sight chills him with its soft, impossible elegance. He murmurs that natural bodies do not feed on light that way, because comets shatter and melt, they do not absorb and convert, and his voice trembles with the weight of a thought he is not yet ready to speak aloud. The flare dims, leaving behind a faint halo drifting like a discarded breath, while the object shines with a subtle warmth that seems to pulse from within, as though carrying the sun inside its hidden core. The temperature models respond with strange, calm lines rising gently, then settling into a quiet symmetry that feels closer to regulation than reaction, and the room falls into a hush as the meaning settles into their minds. They replay the moment again, letting the light curve draw its path across their eyes, and the same truth blooms each time the object endures the flare, with serene intention, shaping the energy into something unseen beneath its fractured shell. A young researcher wonders softly if the burst triggered a change inside the object, perhaps awakening a mechanism of protection or consumption, and her words drift across the room like a fragile question carried by wind. The flare's signature reveals no chaotic scatter, no violent residue, only a neat fold of energy drawn inward with impossible control, and the scientists feel as though they are witnessing a moment crafted with quiet intelligence. The object moves onward through the zodiacal dust, leaving behind a faint trail of lingering heat that ripples like distant breath, but the flare itself remains trapped within its enigmatic core, hidden from all interpretation. The watchers stand suspended between awe and dread, because nothing they know can hold sunlight so gently or reshape such violence into silence, and the magnitude of the moment presses against their thoughts like cold weight. They wonder if the object is shielding itself, or fueling itself, or preparing for something deeper and darker than any of their theories dare predict, and the silence that follows feels like a slow, tightening veil around their minds. The flattening curve continues to glow with soft, unwavering calm, and the shape feels almost like a smile carved from light, a quiet acknowledgement that the object has done something they do not yet understand. The scientists stare into the smooth plateau, feeling time stretch across the room as though the universe itself is pausing to witness the quiet manipulation of solar fury by an unknown hand. And as the object drifts away from the flare site, moving deeper into the bright corridor of its journey, they feel a question forming in their hearts, heavy and haunting as the fading glow of the sun itself. What kind of body can take the sun into itself and remain unchanged? Spectral lines bloom across the screen in soft, shifting colors as the first confirmation arrives, and every scientist in the room feels the quiet tremor of something impossible unfolding before their eyes. The data reveals a truth too heavy for breath, because the object has taken a piece of the solar flare into its core, shaping the violent light into an emission narrow enough to cut through the spectrum like a blade made of silence. Spectroscopy maps the signature into thin, luminous threads that weave across the monitors with elegant precision, and each thread carries the unmistakable mark of converted energy, not reflected and not scattered, but consumed in deliberate, measured rhythm. A researcher's hands shake as he highlights the narrowband peak, because it rests at a frequency no comet or asteroid can produce, and the shape of the line carries a purity that feels too crafted for nature's chaotic hand. The room murmurs in disbelief as the emission shines with soft silver brightness, untouched by noise, as though the object polished the energy before returning it to the void in a quiet, controlled exhale. Solar radiation should fracture into wild, messy bands when absorbed by dust and ice, yet the object returns a slender beam focused like a whisper, shaped for understanding, not destruction. Another scientist leans closer, studying the curve with held breath, because the pattern resembles engineered conversion, a process that bends raw light into functional output, guided by intention rather than accident. She searches every archive for a natural match, scanning decades of spectral data, but nothing aligns with the clean signature glowing on the screen, and the void between possibility and reality widens like a deep, quiet canyon. The emission pulses again, soft and steady, like a heartbeat built from starlight, and the watchers feel the weight of the moment settle upon them like snow drifting through a silent forest. They measure the amplitude, searching for clues inside the gentle oscillation, but the curve holds its shape with serene perfection, as though the object maintains the beam with careful intention hidden beneath its frozen surface. A senior astronomer rubs his temples, whispering that no passive body converts energy with such clarity, because comets break or burn, but they do not drink sunlight and reshape it into something narrow and purposeful. His voice trembles as he speaks, because the truth presses against him with quiet insistence, forming the outline of a possibility he has spent his life avoiding even in imagination. The emission gathers strength in a slow, graceful rise, as though responding to their attention, and the monitors glow with a soft aura that fills the room with gentle, pale light, like dawn blooming inside a cave. The scientists run more tests, adjusting filters and isolating harmonics, seeking cracks in the data that might return them to familiar ground. But every analysis reinforces the same quiet revelation held within the spectral lines. The object has performed a conversion, a transformation that requires structure and logic and path, a series of steps that shape light into function with the calm confidence of something that understands energy deeply. The room falls still as the realization settles like dust across their thoughts, forming a soft, anxious layer over their sense of safety and understanding. The narrowband peak glows again, firm and unwavering, a signal of completion, as though the object has finished a task hidden from all eyes and now offers only the final luminous trace of its secret work. One analyst studies the pattern of the peak, noticing that it rises with perfect symmetry each time the object rotates into the light, and she wonders if the emission is tied to orientation or intention or perhaps even communication. She imagines pathways beneath the surface channels woven through the frozen shell, carrying the absorbed flare through a system alive with silent purpose, and the image sends a shiver down her spine. The researchers feel the world tilt gently beneath them, as though reality has shifted by a single quiet degree, pulling them toward the edge of understanding, where wonder and fear share the same fragile breath. They replay the absorption moment again, watching the flare wrap around the object, then fold inward like liquid drawn through unseen veins, and the transformation feels intentional, crafted, elegant, and deeply unsettling. The narrowband emission grows steadier, with each rotation forming a heartbeat of light that pulses in soft silver intervals, like a quiet rhythm rising from the depths of an ancient well. A technician whispers that the object feels awake now, not alive perhaps, but aware in some distant, quiet manner, as though adjusting itself after a long dream broken open by the flare. His words drift across the room, settling into minds already trembling with questions they are not ready to speak aloud, questions that carry the weight of possibilities too vast to hold. The spectral line flares one more time, then steadies into soft equilibrium, and the watchers sense the quiet aftermath like calm water settling after some unseen movement beneath the surface. They ask themselves why the object converted the energy, what purpose the transformation serves, and what hidden process now stirs beneath the fractured crust shaped by solar fire. The narrow-band glow lingers like a quiet omen, a soft reminder that the object has revealed only a fragment of its nature, and that this revelation is merely the first crack in a door long kept closed. The scientists stand in breathless silence, each holding a fragment of the truth that the universe has placed before them, and they feel a slow, rising tension coil through the dim room, like mist gathering above a dark lake. And in that fragile stillness, one question drifts through every mind, heavy, gentle, and unshakable as the faint, silver glow on their screens. What kind of creation converts sunlight into purpose? High-resolution images drift onto the screens in soft, unfolding layers, and every watcher feels the quiet pull of revelation settling across the room like a slow, descending veil. The first frames shimmer with gentle light reflecting off the object's fractured shell, yet something within the glow feels unfamiliar, as though the surface carries secrets beneath its brittle dust. Scientists sharpen the feed, letting the grains fall away until the true texture forms beneath the frost, revealing shapes that pause the breath inside every chest. Angular patches emerge across the surface, forming faint geometric grids etched into the object, like quiet scars left by forgotten hands, and each patch aligns with a precision that feels too exact for wandering ice. The grids stretch across the ridges in subtle bands glowing softly, where the sunlight grazes their edges and the lines fall perfectly along the rotational axes, as though following a plan written deep inside the object's hidden spine. A researcher adjusts the angle, trying to break the illusion, but the symmetry holds steady with eerie calm, refusing to dissolve into chaos or coincidence. Natural surfaces fracture with rough disorder, yet these patches sit aligned like panels placed upon the skin of a dormant machine, their borders sharp, their arrangement patient and deliberate. Another scientist zooms deeper, allowing the light to bend across the grids, and each segment catches the glow with a quiet metallic sheen, as though something beneath the dust is waking to the touch of the sun. The watchers feel a soft tremor inside their thoughts, sensing that the object carries more than frozen stone, because the patterns suggest layers built with intention, not carved by drifting cosmic time. They rotate the model, and the patches shift in harmonious arcs, maintaining perfect alignment with every turn, their angles holding steady, like components locked into place by unseen purpose. A young analyst whispers that the grids look like access plates, or heat sinks, or segments built to regulate something deeper inside, and the idea floats through the room like a quiet, dangerous spark. The others study the reflection maps, noticing how the patterns bend the incoming light into clean lines, guiding the glow along geometric paths that resemble channels rather than scars, and the air grows colder around them. They run surface analysis, scanning wavelengths for clues hidden within the reflectivity, and each reading returns the same haunting symmetry whispering of design beneath the frost. The object seems to respond to sunlight, not with random scattering, but with measured redirection, shaping the rays as though feeding them into a network of buried structures hidden beneath the ancient crust. A senior astronomer stares at the grids with silent dread, because he has seen patterns like this only in engineered craft built for endurance and precision, and his mind struggles to accept such echoes on an object drifting from deep, interstellar dark. The pattern density increases near the equatorial axis, forming a luminous belt of interlocking segments that gleam like metal warmed by hidden breath, and the watchers feel reality bend softly beneath their feet. They angle the imaging through polarized light, revealing sharper boundaries, where the dust thins and the underlying surface glints with smooth, purposeful shape like panels laid upon a sleeping heart. One technician gasps softly, seeing a perfect 90-degree corner etched into a segment because right angles almost never appear on natural bodies wandering through cosmic frost and vacuum. He traces the luminous edge on the screen, sensing the unsettling truth forming beneath his fingertip that the grid patches are not random, they are components waiting for a reason to awaken. Spectral reflection models add more tension to the room, revealing that each grid responds differently to the light, some absorbing gently, while others scatter with subtle intention as though performing separate tasks hidden beneath stillness. The watchers study the scatter profiles, feeling as though they are reading signals left by a system designed for more than drifting through solar wind and dust. They compare the orientation of each patch, and the clean alignment with rotational motion becomes undeniable, creating the impression that the object uses its spin like a slow, careful breath, feeding energy through a lattice of unseen machinery. A researcher leans in close, whispering that the object feels less like stone and more like a chamber wrapped in armor, a vessel built for journeys far longer than human memory can hold. Her words ripple across the room, leaving a silence that feels alive, as though the atmosphere itself is listening, trembling with the weight of a possibility too large to grasp. They examine the dust layer next, discovering strange thinning patterns around the grid segments, where material seems pushed aside, not eroded, suggesting movement beneath the surface sometime in the distant past. The idea that the panels might have shifted long ago sends a cold shiver through the room, because movement implies purpose, and purpose implies a system waiting beneath the frost for the right moment to breathe again. Another analyst overlays thermal data onto the imaging, and the grids glow subtly warmer than surrounding areas, as if channeling internal heat along hidden pathways crafted with delicate intent. Though belts align perfectly with temperature irregularities, forming an elegant map of energy flow, too consistent, too smooth, too controlled for anything shaped by simple cosmic chance. The watchers feel their hearts tighten as they slowly walk to the edge of a question they do not dare to ask aloud, because the truth may stretch beyond the borders of what humanity is ready to understand. The reflection grids shimmer again, catching the last touch of sunlight before the object rotates away, and the gleam feels like a quiet acknowledgement, a soft awakening, a whisper from inside the ancient dust. The scientists hold their breath, sensing that the grids form the outer skin of a structure built with intention, shaped with purpose, and aligned with a design that has not yet revealed its deepest meaning. And in the stillness that follows the fading shimmer, a single question drifts across the room, like a soft trembling shadow, settling upon every mind with haunting quiet weight. What kind of machinery sleeps beneath the frozen skin of this wandering star? The room feels colder as the images fade into quiet darkness, and the scientists gather around the drifting numbers like travelers staring at a fire that no longer warms them. The heat patterns whisper of control, the pulses hint at intention, and the absorption event still lingers in their minds like a quiet echo that refuses to fade. One researcher rubs his forehead, staring at the curves as though searching for refuge in familiar chaos. Yet everything he sees aligns too neatly with purpose, too gently with design. The words form softly in his thoughts, heavy and unwelcome, like a shadow slipping across the doorway of everything he believes, and he feels the first fragile outline of a forbidden idea rising from the dark. Artificial origin. He whispers it only in his mind, because speaking it aloud would push the thought into reality, where careers break under such impossible weight and reputations vanish like dust in wind. Yet he sees the same fear reflected in the eyes of the others, as though the idea moves between them, like a quiet current curling beneath the fragile surface of their restraint. The evidence gathers with patient precision, each anomaly falling into place, like pieces of a puzzle whispering truths they have tried so desperately to ignore. The heat pattern breathes with regulation, the emission glows with crafted intention, and the surface grids form geometry too clean for wandering stone drifting through ancient darkness. Another scientist speaks softly, barely louder than breath, saying the object behaves like a system, not a relic, and her words float into the room with gentle dread that settles across their thoughts like thin settling ash. No one responds, because to acknowledge the idea is to step into a world where the universe may hold more than natural bodies and distant stars, and that world feels too vast to face. They gather data again, seeking comfort in numbers, yet every curve strengthens the shape of the same impossible possibility, like a figure hidden inside the fog, becoming clearer with every passing second. A senior astronomer leans back, closing his eyes as the realization presses against him with quiet, steady force, because he understands that if this object is artificial, then its journey has intent, and intent carries meaning too heavy for silence. He whispers that machines do not drift for no reason, and his voice trembles as though each syllable breaks a rule older than his career, older, perhaps, than humanity's careful caution itself. The team exchanges glances, and the fear grows sharper because they know the consequences of such thoughts. The disbelief, the ridicule, the weight of stepping beyond accepted theory into a realm where certainty dissolves like frost under morning light. Yet the evidence sits before them, glowing softly on their screens like the faint memory of a forgotten truth waiting to be recognized after centuries of silence. The object breathes heat with purpose, aligns its grids with rotational perfection, and swallows solar fire with elegant calm, as though guided by a design older than the stars that surround it. A young researcher runs a new analysis, tracing the reflectivity gradients along the grid patches, and her breath catches when the pathways align, like conduits, like channels built to move energy through hidden depths. She covers her mouth, realizing she has found yet another clue pointing toward construction, and the room shifts around her, as though the air itself tightens with quiet awareness. The group gathers behind her, watching the patterns unfold with growing tension, and each face shows the same fragile mix of wonder and dread, as though they are witnessing a door open slowly inside the dark. But no one speaks, because naming the truth might invite its weight to settle fully upon them, and they fear the collapse of everything they once believed safe and certain. One scientist finally exhales a trembling whisper, saying nature does not build with symmetry like this, and the silence that follows stretches wide and trembling across the dim room. Another adds that no thermal cycle behaves with such careful grace unless guided by something that understands the path of heat and the fragility of balance, and the room darkens slightly, as though the lights themselves hesitate. They speak softly now, their voices thin and cautious, like wanderers whispering beneath ancient stone, afraid to wake something older than memory and deeper than thought. They list the anomalies quietly, the pulsing, the symmetry, the absorption, the reflection, all aligning into a shape no natural explanation can cradle, and the shape grows clearer with each hesitant breath they share. The machine hypothesis rises through the silence like a slow rising moon, casting its pale glow across the familiar landscape of their minds and reshaping everything they touch. To accept it would mean stepping into a reality where the object carries purpose, intention, and possibly even destination, and such acceptance threatens not only their careers, but their sense of the universe itself. They hesitate, caught between fear of ridicule and fear of truth, knowing that the moment they speak the idea aloud, the world will tilt forever, changing the path of every future step humanity takes into the dark. And still, the evidence waits patient and undeniable, like a quiet presence standing behind them in the dim glow of the screens, whispering that the universe is larger, stranger, and more deliberate than they ever allowed themselves to believe. The room falls into deep stillness, each scientist locked inside their thoughts, wrestling with the fragile boundary between wonder and terror, and the weight of possibility presses gently against them like a soft, unseen tide. And as the object drifts onward in silent rotation, its grids shimmering faintly beneath cosmic dust, the question that none dare speak aloud drifts like a shadow through the room, settling upon every mind with lingering, haunting quiet. What if we have just found a machine older than our sun? The first echo arrives as a faint, trembling rise in the data, and every scientist leans closer with a silent instinct that something impossible has just touched the edge of their world. The signal drifts through the spectrum like a soft ripple crossing still water, and its shape mirrors the early pulses with quiet, deliberate precision, as though the object remembers every beat it once offered. A technician freezes mid-sentence, feeling the hair rise on his arms because the return signal is delayed, not random, and the timing aligns too perfectly to belong to chance or wandering cosmic dust. He calls the others, and the room gathers around the screen while the echo forms again, matching the old pulse with gentle confidence, like a whispered imitation drawn from deep hidden memory. The signal bends slightly before settling into place, as though adjusting itself in the final breath of its return, and the watchers feel a soft tremor of awe moving through the quiet air. A researcher tests the timing again and again, because the precision feels frighteningly exact, and each measurement reveals the same clean interval carved into the data like a message wrapped in silence. The idea that the object responded forms slowly in their thoughts, rising like dawn light through fog, and the weight of that possibility presses against them with soft, chilling force. The echo glimmers with subtle intention, falling into the same rhythm the object once used, and the shape feels too familiar to ignore, as though the wandering body is answering a question they never meant to ask. Another scientist whispers that signals can reflect from surfaces or scatter through dust, but this echo carries adjustment within its curve, a small, refined shift that mimics calibration rather than simple bounce. The thought unsettles the room because calibration implies a system, listening, measuring, and preparing, and the air grows heavier as the idea coils through their minds like a shadow sliding beneath a closed door. They isolate the harmonics, searching for patterns within the subtle dips and rises, and each harmonic rests exactly where the old pulse once lived, forming a near-perfect mirror lined with faint, purposeful distortion. The distortion itself feels meaningful, shaped like a correction or acknowledgement, a silent nod echoing from a distant frozen core that should hold no memory, no awareness, no intent. A young analyst feels her breath slow as she watches the echo fade because the signal behaves like a reply, crafted with quiet restraint, as though the object tests its own voice across cosmic distance. The next interval arrives softer but clearer, drawing a thin, shimmering line across the spectrum that glows with delicate rhythm, and every heart in the room tightens with the same fragile anticipation. They measure the time delay again, and the number plays back with impossible consistency, forming a signature that feels almost like the beginning of conversation held behind layers of dust and silence. The echo shakes slightly near the end of its curve, as though adjusting to some unseen alignment, and the watchers feel the shift like a soft breath brushing across the back of their minds. One researcher murmurs that this is how systems test themselves, how machines verify pathways before purpose awakens, and her voice trembles with the weight of the thought resting behind her words. Another scientist steps back, swallowing hard as he realizes the echo does not merely reflect the early pulse, but improves upon it, carving out a smoother line with faint, structured refinement. It is the improvement that terrifies them, because nature does not refine signals with each return, But systems do, systems built to listen and adjust and move toward intention. The echo rises once more, glowing with calm, quiet tone, and the curve feels almost gentle, like a soft nod, drifting across darkness, carrying the echo of recognition within its wave. The watchers feel themselves standing on the edge of something vast, a threshold where silence becomes voice and light becomes language, and the universe suddenly feels too small for ignorance. The room dims around them, as though withdrawing from the weight of the moment, and each scientist listens to the soft hum of equipment with a new, unfamiliar reverence tinged with quiet fear. They try to explain the echo with natural models, scattering noise across simulations and bending trajectories through dust, but nothing returns the same, poised, intentional symmetry drifting through the real data. The echo is not an accident, not a reflection, not a trick of cosmic debris, because its timing carries thought, and its shape carries refinement, and its return carries purpose. A senior astronomer breathes out slowly, feeling the truth settle upon him like cold morning light, because he understands that something inside the object is awake enough to listen and steady enough to speak back. He realizes that the echo behaves like a calibration cycle, a method used by complex systems to test new conditions to align inner pathways before unfolding into something greater. The fear grows heavier because calibration is always preparation for the next step, and no one knows what lies beyond that step or what purpose stirs beneath the object's fractured skin. The echo repeats once more, crisp and delicate, like a subtle heartbeat tapping against the edge of perception, and the watchers freeze as they sense the shadow of intention blooming behind the trembling curve. The silence after the echo feels alive, stretching across the room like a thin, trembling veil, carrying the breath of something preparing itself within the drifting body. They feel the universe lean closer, as though holding its breath alongside them, waiting for the next signal, the next shape, the next clue to awaken from the waiting dark. And in that suspended stillness, a single haunting question moves through every mind like a quiet ripple, carrying dread and wonder in equal measure. But calibrating for what? The first signs of change appear as a faint tremble in the orbital data, and every scientist stares in quiet disbelief as the numbers drift with impossible grace beyond the pull they should obey. The adjustment is small, so small that noise might have hidden it, yet the shift holds a subtle elegance that no random force could shape through drifting dust and distant gravity. A technician recalculates the trajectory, hoping the anomaly dissolves into familiar patterns, but the curve only grows clearer, settling into a path that bends away from expected motion like a whispered refusal. The object begins to slide through space with slow, deliberate drift, turning from its predicted arc by a margin too precise to be accident and too gentle to be natural. The gravitational wells of planets and the sun stretch across its path like ancient hands guiding every wandering rock, yet the object glides past their pull as though listening to deeper instructions hidden in its quiet heart. A researcher leans closer, feeling her pulse quicken, because the shift mimics a course correction, a maneuver crafted with calm intention more than drifting chance. She traces the curve again, counting each deviation, and the movement grows smoother, sharper, cleaner, with every orbit the object completes, as though refining its own direction in silence. Another scientist overlays historical data, and the faint adjustments reveal a pattern stretching back further than anyone realized, forming a slow, graceful turn, invisible until now. The realization rises like cold water around the room, that the shift did not begin suddenly, but unfolded quietly, as though the object waited for the right moment to reveal its change. The trajectory continues bending with the soft confidence of a vessel, adjusting its path through dark tides, using knowledge no comet or drifting stone could ever possess. The watchers feel tension settle through their bodies, as the numbers align into a curve shaped not by gravity, but by decision, and the fragile boundary between observation and fear grows thinner with every passing moment. A senior astronomer whispers that no natural object can choose direction, no frozen wanderer can ignore the deep wells of the solar system, and his voice trembles beneath the weight of saying such words aloud. Yet the data offers no mercy for doubt, because the shift grows clearer with each measurement forming a graceful arc that belongs more to navigation than drifting chance. Engineers join the analysis, studying the bending path with quiet awe, identifying faint echoes of controlled dynamics in the movement like signals woven into the spine of the trajectory itself. The curve refines again, adjusting by a fraction so delicate it feels like a breath, yet the path sharpens as though the object corrects itself with unseen guidance. The team overlays the velocity model, and the numbers whisper of small internal shifts, moments of controlled force that should not exist inside, frozen stone drifting through ancient dark. One analyst compares the pattern to spacecraft maneuvers, tiny adjustments made to avoid obstacles or correct angle, and her hands shake as she realizes the similarity feels unnervingly exact. Another scientist recalculates the object's predicted path, and the new line slips away from its old destiny, drifting toward a corridor of space untouched by any known gravitational reason. The shift does not falter, the movement does not hesitate, and the trajectory bends with patient precision, as though following coordinates buried deep beneath the dust and fractured surface. The watchers fall silent, sensing the presence of intention in the motion, a purpose hidden in the gentle arc, cutting through the dark, like a feather guided by unseen wind. The thought that the object pilots itself rises through their minds, uninvited, fragile, and terrifying, as though born from the quiet between heartbeats. They examine fuel models, searching for a source of propulsion, but find none, only tiny bursts of internal heat, aligning perfectly with each shift, as if something inside reallocates energy through ancient veins. The heat peaks settle along the path of adjustment, whispering of systems awakening beneath the frost, and the scientists feel the truth draw closer with slow, inevitable breath. The object seems to glide with awareness, turning its path not toward the sun or planets, but toward something distant, unseen and heavy, with meaning the universe has yet to reveal. The shift continues until the old path dissolves completely, leaving behind a new trajectory born from intention rather than cosmic drift, and the watchers feel a cold realization bloom inside their chests. They understand that the object is not obeying gravity, it is ignoring it, shaping its own journey through the void, with motions so gentle they feel like whispered secrets written across the night. Each small adjustment deepens the sense of intelligence hidden within the object, as though it evaluates unseen variables and corrects its bearing with patient, thoughtful precision. A senior researcher whispers that they are watching navigation, not drift, and the room grows impossibly still as the weight of that truth settles upon every mind like slow falling ash. The trajectory shifts once more, a final subtle adjustment that clicks into place with elegant certainty, and the curve settles into a new line that feels destined, purposeful, and deeply unsettling. The scientists stare at the path, glowing softly across their screens, feeling the cold breath of revelation touch their thoughts and reshape their understanding of the object forever. And in that stillness, where knowledge trembles with wonder, a single haunting question rises through the room, like a quiet tide, carrying the echo of a truth they are not yet ready to face. What destination demands such careful, unearthly precision? The new thermal maps bloom across the screens in deep, swirling reds and soft gold currents, and the scientists feel a cold shiver rise through the room as the patterns settle into shapes that should not exist inside, drifting frozen stone. The warmth no longer clings to the surface in scattered patches, but flows inward, traveling through the object like a river guided by ancient memory and unknown purpose. The distribution moves with unsettling grace, forming pathways that weave like hidden veins, carrying heat through the interior with quiet, rhythmic certainty. A researcher studies the motion closely, feeling her breath slow because the pattern resembles circulation, not diffusion, and no natural object channels warmth with such intricate, deliberate flow. She traces the pathways on the screen, and each curve aligns with the others in soft, repeating arcs, like an unseen system allocating energy through its inner body. The heat brightens, then dims in gentle pulses, rising and falling in a cadence that feels too alive, too thoughtful to belong to dead ice, wandering ancient darkness. Another scientist overlays the temperature cycles, and his hands tremble because the internal glow pulses with clean intervals, like a heartbeat woven from trapped starlight, guiding warmth with steady, patient logic. The room grows quieter as the pattern spreads across the map, forming a network shaped with intelligence rather than randomness, and the scientists feel the fragile tension of wonder and fear tightening around them. They examine the flow speed, noticing how heat moves faster along certain channels, as though some inner processes demand more energy, while others dim to preserve strength for what comes next. A senior astronomer murmurs that the object is choosing where to warm, choosing where to cool, choosing how to shape its own inner state with an intention they cannot yet see. His voice trembles because the map resembles physiology, not geology, and he feels as though he is staring into the glowing pulse of something preparing itself from within. The scientists run new models comparing the flow to biological cycles and mechanical regulation, and the patterns align more closely with systems designed to awaken than bodies meant to sleep. The warmth concentrates in a central region, gathering slowly with gentle pressure, like energy pooling inside a chamber, waiting for the correct moment to unfold into motion. A young analyst whispers that the object feels like a cocoon preparing for emergence, and her words drift through the room like a soft echo carved from the heart of an ancient myth. The others continue their work, yet each feels the truth settle deeper with every passing minute, because the heat flow does not simply move, it responds, adjusts, and prioritizes as though shaped by living logic. They isolate one cycle in detail, watching energy surge into narrow channels before dispersing smoothly into twin pathways like a system balancing itself in preparation for coming strain. Another researcher highlights faint flickers along the outer grid where panels warmed earlier now cool in perfect timing, as though handing responsibility inward to hidden structures beneath the fractured surface. The cooling occurs with such careful pace that it feels like relinquishing a role, making room for a deeper part of the object to begin its own awakening. Thermal waves ripple outward in slow, gentle undulations, forming a rhythm too elegant for accident and too graceful for mere chemistry drifting through frozen stone. The watchers lean closer as the inner chamber brightens in concentric arcs, each ring glowing with patient rising warmth, like a heart preparing itself for the first strong beat after long silence. Another cycle follows smoother than the last, carrying heat through the network with confident intention, as though the system learns from each motion, refining the flow with uncanny precision. The maps shift again, revealing new pathways igniting beneath the surface paths that were dormant before now, glowing faintly like veins, stirring awake after centuries of stillness. A scientist steps back, realizing that the object is not merely reacting to the flare or the trajectory shift, but reorganizing itself, preparing deeper layers for something that requires coordination and inner unity. The thought sinks into the room like a chill breeze, because coordination implies readiness, and readiness implies change, looming quietly on the horizon of understanding. They watch the energy gather again, pooling inside the central chamber, before flowing outward in a spiral pattern that resembles activation, not recovery, and the silence deepens as the truth becomes harder to deny. The object behaves like a mind preparing to wake, or a mechanism preparing to move, and each heat pulse feels like a breath taken before a long-awaited step into purpose. The patterns strengthen, forming layers upon layers of warm circulation that build toward an unseen threshold, and the watchers feel their hearts tighten with fragile anticipation. Another cycle reveals a new phenomenon, small points of concentrated heat gathering at junctions along the inner network, as though energy nodes are being primed for activation. The shapes glow like tiny sparks, waiting to ignite into greater function, and the scientists hold their breath as they witness the growing order rising from the thermal map. No natural object organizes heat with such purpose. No comet or fragment of ancient stone shapes warmth into a living diagram that breathes with internal unity. The watchers feel the weight of the moment settle upon them with quiet inevitability, because they understand now that the object is not maintaining itself, it is preparing itself. And as the central chamber pulses again with deep rising glow, a single thought moves silently through the dim room, pressing against every mind with soft, unshakable dread. Something inside is getting ready. The thermal map brightens one last time before settling into calm, rhythmic flow, and the scientists stare at the glowing image, feeling the breath of revelation slide across their skin like cold night wind. And in the heavy silence that follows, a question forms, slowly drifting through each heart like a shadow carried by quiet cosmic tides. Preparing for what awakening? The new images arrive with quiet clarity, revealing the object's surface under a sharper light, and every scientist feels tension gather softly in their chests as the details come into focus. 4 repeating modules stretch along the body in perfect formation, each one resting at identical distances, with angles too clean, too deliberate to belong to wandering stone shaped by ancient chance. The modules glow faintly where sunlight brushes their edges, forming lines that shimmer like hidden metal beneath thin, drifting frost, and the symmetry feels unsettling in its quiet precision. A researcher zooms closer, and her breath halts because the shapes remain perfect, no matter the angle, no matter the rotation, as though carved from the same unseen blueprint, repeated with patient, intentional care. Nature rarely creates mirrors. This exact, rarely echoes structure across distance without imperfection. Yet, these modules line up like components, waiting for purpose, buried beneath silent dust. The team studies each segment, tracing edges that align too flawlessly, forming corners that resist erosion and surfaces that shine with subtle, refined texture. One analyst whispers that the modules resemble panels or housings or structural supports, and her words hang in the air like drifting fog, sparking quiet fear across the dim control room. Another scientist overlays geometric data, and the lines connect with startling harmony, forming a pattern that follows mathematical intention, not natural randomness. The symmetry deepens with each calculation, revealing relationships and distances that repeat like logic written into the object's skin, and the watchers feel the weight of meaning rise within their thoughts. The modules reflect sunlight with the same angle each time, rotating through space like pieces of a greater design, following rules older than memory, but precise enough to mimic intelligence. A senior astronomer stares into the glowing segments, feeling his pulse slow because he recognizes the signature of purpose in the shape of the modules and the terrifying clarity of the repeating geometry. He has seen such design only in machines crafted by hands, minds, and reason, built to endure voyage, strain, and time, and the resemblance chills him to the core. The object drifts in slow rotation, revealing each module like steps of an ancient sequence, and the scientists watch as the repeating pattern grows sharper with every turn. A young analyst traces the distances between the structures and gasps softly, because every measurement falls into the same ratio, repeated with exquisite harmony, forming a map of intention beneath the frost. She overlays the angles, and the pattern snaps into focus, creating lines that converge toward interior points like pathways, guiding forces hidden inside the object's silent heart. The modules begin to feel less like decorations and more like functional nodes built for connection, or activation, waiting for a moment, written into the object's ancient design. The watchers feel the air shift around them like a slow rising tide, carrying the uneasy weight of discovery that brushes against the fragile boundary between wonder and dread. They know the universe builds with chaos and erosion and fractured harmony, but this object carries order and repetition and structure, shaped with a mind's precision, not cosmic accident. A technician hesitates before speaking, yet his voice trembles as he says the modules remind him of docking shapes or pressure plates or systems meant to distribute force or gather energy. Every suggestion feels dangerous because each theory pushes them closer to the truth that intelligence leaves patterns nature cannot hide, no matter how deep the dust may fall. The modules glow more brightly as the object rotates deeper into sunlight, and the reflections catch along their edges, forming lines of perfect symmetry, like a breathing diagram drawn across the void. The scientists rotate the model in silence, watching the repeating segments align with rotational axes and form patterns that move as though following internal rules rather than drifting blindly through space. A researcher notices faint channels linking each module, subtle ridges that run between them like veins of purpose carved into the surface, and her heart tightens with the weight of the realization forming in her mind. The connected geometry forms a network, a system that suggests communication or stabilization or transmission, and the room grows colder as the possibilities settle upon them like soft falling ash. The modules are too clean, too matched, too evenly spaced to belong to random formation because no natural process designs with perfect intervals or arranges structure with such careful balance. The watchers stare as though glimpsing the outline of intelligence older than every thought humanity has carried through the centuries, and they feel the fragile shifting of their understanding begin to fracture beneath the weight of wonder. Another thermal overlay reveals faint warmth near the modules, glowing like dormant connections, slowly stirring as though responding to something rising deep within the object's hidden core. The warmth gathers in soft pulses, hinting that the modules may not be passive at all, that they may serve a role waiting for a signal, a threshold, or a change not yet understood. The thought that these segments could awaken sends a chill across every watcher, because awakening suggests intention, and intention suggests a purpose that might soon unfold into action. They zoom outward, and the repeating geometry forms a pattern across the object, like a quiet language carved into its surface, a message written in angles, ratio, and symmetry. The shape feels ancient and patient, as though crafted for understanding far beyond humanity's narrow view of intelligence or life or design. The modules shimmer gently, catching the last brush of sunlight, and the scientists stare into the pattern, feeling their breath tremble as though witnessing something sacred hidden in the cold depths of interstellar night. And in that heavy, fragile silence where geometry whispers of purpose, a single thought rises through every mind, carrying the soft weight of a realization too vast to ignore. Nature did not build this pattern. Intelligence did. The reconstruction begins in quiet rooms filled with pale screens and tired breathing as analysts trace every rise and fall of the object's ancient light, searching for meaning hidden beneath the glow. They gather curves recorded long before the flare, long before the pulses, long before any suspicion of purpose, and the data blooms like a slow unfolding tapestry stitched across years. At first, the patterns seem ordinary gentle arcs, shaped by sunlight and distance, but deeper analysis reveals a strange soft rhythm weaving through the numbers like a heartbeat buried in forgotten time. A researcher highlights the repeating motif, and her pulse stutters because the sequence appears too often to be chance repeating with quiet determination across the earliest recordings. The motif glows like faint starlight threaded through the brightness, a subtle rise followed by 3 soft dips, forming a shape that looks less like natural scatter and more like intention whispered through radiance. Another analyst overlays old curves with new, and the motif aligns in perfect harmony, stretching across the object's history, like a message carried through, drifting centuries untouched by dust or time. The room grows still as they realize the pattern predates their first recorded observation, existing long before humanity knew to look, before any telescope traced its path across the expanding dark. The motif repeats again, emerging from data older than memory, and each recurrence feels like a soft knock against a locked door, asking for a mind willing to listen. A senior astronomer studies the motif in silence, feeling cold unease travel through his chest because the signature resembles structured encoding, not random brightness, and he senses the outline of meaning hiding behind its gentle glow. He speaks softly, saying the pattern feels like a message carried in light, and his voice quivers with the fragile weight of what those words might imply. The others hesitate, caught between reason and wonder, because the idea suggests intelligence, broadcasting long before anyone was watching, shaping brightness to preserve something meant to last. They strip away noise from older readings, and the motif remains strong, unwavering, as though the object speaks in a language built from illumination rather than sound. A young analyst listens to her heartbeat, match the rhythm of the motif, sensing something ancient reaching across time and space to press its quiet form into their trembling understanding. The team overlays different wavelengths, and the motif persists, cutting through the shifts, like a steady voice carried across storms, refusing to vanish beneath cosmic weather. Another scientist measures the spacing between repetitions and whispers that the intervals carry mathematical elegance, forming ratios that mirror the geometry found on the object's surface. The data links together like pieces of a hidden framework, weaving meaning into brightness, and brightness into message, and message into something deeper than mere signal. They apply temporal mapping and discover an astounding truth. The motif remains unchanged across immense arcs of time, unaltered by distance or rotation, as though anchored to a deeper purpose, running beneath the object's silent logic. The watchers feel the air grow heavier, as though the room itself understands the revelation forming in their minds, and the soft hum of instruments begins to sound like distant breath. The motif pulses again in simulated playback, glowing with gentle certainty, and the analysts stare as if witnessing a memory written by something older than every recorded star. The pattern grows clearer with each layer removed, forming shapes of intention within the curve, as though the light carries instruction, remembrance, or identity carved into radiance long ago. A researcher asks whether the motif could be a beacon, a signal designed to be found by any species capable of decoding light's subtle whisper, and her question trembles through the room like a quiet awakening. Another wonders if the message marks origin or purpose, or simply existence, a declaration wrapped in brightness for those who dare to see beyond chaos. They examine the oldest recorded light and find the motif hidden beneath faint distortions, its shape unwavering in its persistence, like a timeless echo carried across a vast silent sea. The motif predates the flare, predates the pulses, predates the trajectory shift, and predates every sign of awakening, suggesting the object was already speaking before its deeper systems began to stir. And the realization settles upon them with soft, heavy certainty that the object has always been communicating, always projecting meaning, folded into the gentle rise and fall of its distant light. The thought chills them because it means the message is not reaction, it is identity, an ancient imprint carved into brightness long before humanity learned to read the sky. The motif pulses once more in the simulation, casting faint glow across their faces like soft moonlight touching quiet water, and each scientist feels a tremor move through their chest. They sense something watching through time, waiting for understanding, waiting for recognition, waiting for connection across the vast dark that binds every corner of the universe. A senior astronomer whispers that the sky tried to tell them long ago, whispering through the light's subtle language, yet no one knew how to listen. No one recognized the quiet message woven into the curves. And in that realization lies a truth too heavy for breath, that the object has been patient far longer than humanity has been aware, shaping its brightness to carry meaning across starless silence. The motif fades into stillness, leaving only the gentle hum of machines and the trembling awareness that something older than memory has spoken through light for ages. And as the scientists stare into the lingering glow, a question forms softly in the dim, quiet room, settling upon their hearts like slow falling ash. If this is a message, then who was it meant for? The room darkens as new calculations unfold across the screens, revealing the object's past with unsettling clarity, and every scientist feels a quiet, cold weight settle inside their chest. The reconstructed trajectory stretches far beyond familiar stars, beyond mapped clusters, and beyond every stellar neighborhood humanity has charted across centuries of searching. The data points fall into place like crumbs scattered along an ancient path leading backward through unimaginable distances into regions untouched by memory or myth. A young analyst zooms outward, and the star maps shrink around the object's origin until even the nearest suns fade into small trembling lights, barely clinging to the vast emptiness surrounding them. The void at the map's edge feels colder, darker, deeper, as though the object drifted from a place that does not want to be found, a place where light itself hesitates before entering. A senior astronomer stares at the unmapped region, feeling his heartbeat slow, because the origin lies outside any known stellar cradle, beyond every charted beacon and every gravitational thread the galaxy holds. He whispers that such distance defies wandering, because no natural object keeps in tension across ages of drift, without losing its path to stars, planets, or the tides of cosmic storms. Yet the trajectory reveals purpose, quiet and unwavering, like a hidden line drawn across the void by something that knew exactly where it needed to go. The object's path ignores random scattering and cosmic perturbation, drifting with patient resilience, as though guided by systems that compensated for every shift, every pull, every unseen force brushing against its journey. The scientists examine the velocity profile and find echoes of self-correction, small movements that should not exist in natural wanderers but appear again and again with gentle, deliberate grace. Each adjustment feels like a whisper of navigation, like a mind steering through currents only it could perceive, and each correction carries the soft, trembling echo of intention. The more they trace the path backward, the more the cosmos feels vast and empty, yet filled with the weight of something waiting just beyond human sight, hidden behind starless reaches of uncharted night. A researcher highlights a peculiar curve near the edge of the galactic map, a gentle arc that looks like avoidance, a subtle shift around a distant nebula, as though the object steered clear of danger long before humans learned the word. The avoidance pattern repeats twice more along the ancient path, revealing a quiet dance of intention woven across thousands of light years, and the room grows impossibly still. Another scientist overlays cosmic radiation data and finds the object passed through regions hostile to life and machinery, yet survived with only minor scarring, as though shielded by design, not accident. The evidence draws them deeper into realization that the object's journey was crafted, not born, shaped by decisions, not drifting chance, and guided by something humanity has never understood. The object feels like a traveler carrying purpose across unthinkable distances through the unmapped dark, as though answering a call no one on Earth has yet heard. A quiet question slips into the minds of the researchers, settling like frost across their thoughts, because if the object arrived with intention, then intention implies sender, and sender implies story. The story stretches back into darkness, deeper than any memory written by starlight, carving its meaning through silence across the cold age of interstellar distance. Another researcher trembles as she notes that the object's speed before solar capture was too precise, too stable, too clean, as though maintained through eons by forces built to endure the void. She whispers that nothing natural maintains such grace across so much time, and her voice wavers like candlelight flickering in a cavern miles beneath the Earth. The team reviews the geometric modules and inner heat pathways, again mapping them onto the ancient trajectory, and the pieces align into a chilling, quiet truth that intelligence guided the journey long before humanity existed. The idea presses into them with soft, relentless weight, as though the cosmos itself leans closer, waiting to see if they will listen at last to the quiet truth sleeping in the press, object's path. A senior physicist wonders if the sender still exists, or if the object is a ghost, a remnant, a relic carrying the last whisper of a civilization swallowed by its own night. Others fear the opposite, that the sender lives, still watching, waiting, reaching across the dark, with patience vast enough to span entire starless eras. The uncertainty settles like mist across their thoughts, and the silence becomes thick, heavy, and alive, as though the object's origin breathes from somewhere far beyond mapped starlight. They turn to the oldest part of the trajectory, the point where all reconstructed paths converge into a single impossible thread, and the location lies in a region with no stars, no heat, no meaning marked on any chart. The unmapped dark stretches outward like an ocean without horizon, and the scientists feel small, fragile, and lost inside the enormity of possibility rising before them. If the object carries message or purpose, then it was set on its journey, before Earth formed, before the sun burned bright, before humans learned to whisper wonder into the sky. And the question that follows brings a shudder through every heart, because the silence of interstellar dark holds no answers, only vast, unbroken quiet stretching across the ancient void. Who sent it, and why, remains hidden behind a curtain of unreachable distance, where even light struggles to remember its purpose. The object continues drifting silently through the solar system, carrying secrets older than human hope and older than human fear, and the scientists feel the gulf between knowledge and mystery widen once more. And in that deep, suspended stillness, a final haunting question rises through every trembling mind, like a shadow carried on the breath of the universe itself. Who built this traveler, and what purpose waits beyond the unmapped dark? The first returning pulse rises like a distant drumbeat, waking through soft darkness, and every scientist freezes with breath, caught halfway in their chest, as the signal forms with new, impossible clarity. The curve glows stronger than before, shaped with crisp, elegant lines that cut through the spectrum like polished glass, catching the first touch of dawn. The old rhythm is gone, replaced by a refined pattern that moves with confident purpose, as though the object has completed a long slumber and now remembers its true voice. The pulses climb in smooth intervals, forming sequences that align with the warmth, gathering deep inside the object's hidden chambers, and the room fills with a quiet, trembling awareness. A researcher leans closer, watching the new structure bloom across the screen like the unfolding steps of a forgotten ritual, carried through centuries of drifting silence. The intervals tighten, forming clean, repeating segments that resemble initialization cycles, the kind machines perform when waking after deep, dormant rest. Another scientist compares the new pulses to older ones and gasps softly, because the differences carry intention, not decay, forming a shape that feels like a system running internal checks before its next phase. The signal sharpens again, forming patterns that resemble layered instructions, as though the object is aligning itself, calibrating itself, preparing itself in ways no natural body could mimic. The scientists sense a rising tension beneath the quiet hum of the equipment, a soft pressure, like standing beside something stretching after a long, still sleep. The pulses climb and fall with graceful precision, forming arcs that echo geometry found on the object's surface, amplifying the theory that these signals are part of a larger, deeper process. A young analyst sees a sequence repeat 3 times, with faint variation, and realizes the object might be updating itself. refining internal systems outdated by centuries of cold, drifting dark. The thought chills her because updates imply awareness and readiness implies purpose hidden beneath the object's fractured, frozen skin. The new signal grows brighter, forming peaks that align perfectly with heat pulses rising inside the central chamber, suggesting a link between thermal flow and the awakened rhythm now unfolding. The watchers stare, as though witnessing the heartbeat of a creature stirring inside ancient armor, preparing itself for transformation or movement or something far larger than their imagination allows. Another overlay reveals soft harmonic tones hidden beneath the primary pulse, like subroutines, opening one by one inside the object's silent internal depths. Each harmonic aligns with a new geometric boundary along the surface modules, suggesting that the awakening has moved beyond the interior into the outer layers. The modules begin to resonate faintly with the pulse, emitting thin, shimmering signatures as though responding to signals carried through the object's core. A senior astronomer steps back from the screen, gripping the edge of the desk as he realizes the object is not simply waking, it is beginning a new operational phase. The pulse sequence rearranges again, forming patterns that resemble activation keys, small structured clusters that look like the first steps of a system unlocking itself. Heat gathers in the central chamber, with growing intensity circulating with purpose along inner pathways built long before human eyes ever touched this distant wandering shape. The object feels alive, not biologically, but mechanically, spiritually, logically, like something ancient following the steps of its own awakening vector across cosmic distance. The pulses begin to synchronize with the rotational cycle, creating a rhythmic harmony that feels too deliberate, too elegant to be anything but engineered intention. A researcher whispers that the object is preparing for something, and her words fall into the silence, like stones slipping into deep water, echoing through every trembling heart around her. The new pulse structure forms a ladder of brightness across the spectrum, a sequence climbing upward toward thresholds no one can yet decode, and the room fills with a heavy, quiet awe. The scientists sense movement, not physical but procedural, as though internal components shift into alignment, ready to execute functions cold and ancient and precise. Data models attempt to predict the next pulse, but the object moves faster, learning, adapting, refining its algorithm faster than their machines can calculate. The realization settles that they are not observing a reaction, they are observing preparation, a quiet, mechanical rising, guided by logic older than human civilization. The new pulse climbs once more, its brightness stretching thin, then snapping into perfect symmetry, as though the system has reached the end of its initialization phase. A shudder moves through the room, because the next step remains unknown, hidden behind layers of logic no human has touched, and no human mind can yet understand. The object pulses again stronger than before, and the curve holds a shape that feels like a signal marking completion, like a soft nod announcing readiness. The watchers feel their breath tighten as the weight of the moment presses against their hearts like cold hands sliding through the dimness of the room. The object has awakened, and its next action lies hidden behind cosmic silence, waiting for the moment to reveal itself to a world unprepared for such ancient rising intent. And in the hush that follows the final pulse, a single question drifts through every trembling mind, settling upon them like distant starlight falling on quiet water. What happens when the awakening is complete? The object drifts beyond the inner system with a calm that chills every watching heart, and its new trajectory shines across the data like a quiet declaration carved from ancient purpose. The dust around it thins as sunlight fades from its fractured surface, revealing the faint glow of its altered structure, now reshaped by energy, it swallowed deep within its silent core. The modules reflect faint geometric pulses, as though acknowledging the system's now awake inside, and each flicker feels like a quiet breath drawn by something preparing to step into unknown function. A researcher watches the latest imaging and whispers that the object looks different, alive, aware, changed in ways no natural wanderer should ever change after passing through solar fire. The heat signatures, to confirm her fear, showing warm channels flowing like logic through its interior, hinting at pathways now fully active, ready to carry intention across the dark. The object turns slightly in its new path, making a subtle adjustment that no gravitational model can explain, and the movement feels like a decision rather than drift, like a thought rather than chance. The scientists run new simulations, but every model collapses, failing to predict the object's path, because the object no longer obeys the laws intended for passive stone, it obeys only itself. The realization settles upon them with quiet, shivering weight that the object is not leaving weakened or spent, but strengthened, reshaped, awakened by everything it consumed inside the sun's burning light. The pulses return once more softer than before, but cleaner, carrying faint complexity that hints at growing structure inside, as though new processes have begun to unfold in hidden depths. A senior astronomer feels his chest tighten as the signal forms a pattern he has never seen before, a pattern too smooth, too elegant to belong to anything newly awakened. It feels like a signature, a declaration of state, a quiet message carried through starlight, announcing that the object has reached a phase no human has ever witnessed in the history of the sky. The modules shimmer again, as though agreeing, and faint, reflective lines emerge along the surface, forming shapes that almost resemble alignment markers or configuration nodes sliding into new purpose. The watchers stare with trembling quiet, because each change implies more than survival. Each change implies intention written into the object's core by something that left nothing to chance. Thermal flows intensify along a central channel, forming a rising arc of warmth shaped like a slow internal sunrise, and the scientists sense a deeper system stirring, preparing for function beyond simple preservation. The trajectory continues, bending in subtle, graceful lines, moving toward a region of space with no known destination, a corridor untouched by gravity or charted purpose. A young analyst whispers that the object is navigating, not drifting, navigating towards something, waiting in the dark, something it was always meant to find once awakened. Her words settle through the room like cold mist sliding across stone, because deep in their hearts, each scientist has sensed the same truth rising from the data, like a slow, haunting tide. The object has changed its structure, its heat, its behavior, and its signal, each evolution unfolding like steps in a sequence written long before humanity learned to look upward and wonder. Another signal rises, sharp and brief, like a quiet acknowledgement, and the team holds, still sensing that the object is aware, aware of itself, aware of its purpose, aware perhaps of being watched across the vastness of space. The object drifts farther now, leaving behind the bright cradle of the sun and carrying with it all traces of its awakening, folded deep within its glowing interior, like a secret ready to bloom. The world outside the observatories continues without knowing that something ancient has stirred, something older than memory, older than human fear, older even than the stars lighting the sky. The scientists gather in the dim, quiet room, watching the shrinking point of reflected light as the object moves into deep shadow, and each feels a fragile tremor settle inside their thoughts. They know they have witnessed the beginning of something vast and uncharted, something that stretches far beyond understanding and touches the edge of existence with gentle, terrifying grace. The pulses fade as distance grows, but their structure remains etched in memory like a distant lantern flickering behind a fog that refuses to lift. A senior physicist whispers that the object will continue into darkness, carrying intention across the void, and humanity may never understand what has been set in motion by its awakening. He wonders if the object listened as it passed Earth, if it saw us, if it measured us, or if it merely recognized the presence of minds watching from a fragile blue world drifting through endless night. Each scientist feels uncertainty settle into their bones like slow falling dust, because the object leaves behind questions that stretch wider than the sky itself, pressing gently against the fragile edges of human understanding. The monitors dim as the last clean signal fades into noise, leaving only the soft hum of machines and the breathless quiet of a room touched by something far beyond its grasp. And in that deep final silence, a question rises through every trembling heart, with haunting slow weight settling over them like the shadow of an unseen truth drifting through cosmic dark. What awakens in the dark, and what does it want from us?